You are not lazy. You have never been lazy. And the fact that you sometimes can't make yourself do the things you genuinely want to do, the things that matter to you, the things you planned with such clarity the night before, that is not a character flaw. It is a biological war happening inside your skull. And the terrifying part is that most people spend their entire lives losing that war without ever understanding what they're actually fighting against. Here is what nobody tells you about motivation. It is not a personality trait. It is not something some people have and others don't. It is not discipline, or willpower, or the result of wanting something badly enough. Motivation is a neurochemical event. It is produced, it is regulated, it is depleted, and it is hijacked, constantly, systematically, and with terrifying efficiency, by the world you live in every single day. Your brain has a motivation system. It runs primarily on a neurotransmitter called dopamine. And dopamine, despite everything you've heard about it, is not actually the pleasure chemical. It is the anticipation chemical. Dopamine does not fire when you achieve something. It fires when you expect to achieve something. It fires in the gap between where you are and where you want to be. It is the chemical of reaching, not of having. And this distinction, this one neurological fact, changes everything about how motivation actually works. Think about the last time you felt genuinely, powerfully motivated. Really sit with it. It was probably the beginning of something, a new plan, a new goal, the first day of a new habit, the moment you decided things were going to be different this time. That feeling, that electric, clear, almost physical sense of forward momentum was dopamine. But here's what's strange. It wasn't produced by the goal itself. It was produced by the novelty of pursuing the goal, by the gap between who you were that morning and who you imagined you would become. And the moment that gap began to close, the moment the new thing became familiar, the moment the plan became routine, the dopamine began to fade. Not because you failed, not because the goal stopped mattering, but because your brain, ancient and efficient and brutally practical, decided that the familiar no longer required chemical motivation to pursue. Your brain stopped paying you to do the thing you most needed to do. This is the central tragedy of human ambition. We are neurologically wired to be excited by the new and bored by the necessary. We are built for the hunt, not the harvest, for the beginning, not the middle. The middle is where almost every meaningful thing in a human life is actually built. The middle of the relationship, the middle of the career, the middle of the creative work, the long, unglamorous, dopamine-depleted middle where nothing feels new anymore, and the finish line still feels impossibly far away. And the middle is exactly where most people quietly give up. Not with a dramatic decision, not with a moment of clarity where they choose to stop. They just slow down imperceptibly, day by day, until one morning they realize they haven't thought about the thing in weeks. The brain didn't fail them. The brain did exactly what it was designed to do. It moved on to something newer. But that's not what scientists discovered about the people who don't give up. Because there are people who sustain motivation, not through superhuman willpower, not through some genetic gift of discipline, but through an understanding, conscious or intuitive, of how the dopamine system actually works. And what they do is both simpler and stranger than anything the self-help industry has ever sold you. They manufacture novelty inside the familiar. Let me explain what that means. Your brain's dopamine system responds to unpredictability, to variation, to the unexpected reward in the expected place. This is why variable reward schedules, the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive, are so neurologically powerful. Not because the reward is large, but because you never know exactly when it's coming. The people who stay motivated long-term have learned, often without realizing it, to introduce controlled unpredictability into their routines. They change the environment they work in. They change the order in which they do things. They set micro-challenges within the larger goal, not to change the destination, but to change the texture of the journey. They keep the brain slightly off balance, slightly uncertain, slightly in the gap. And that gap is where dopamine lives. And this is where everything changes, because the problem with motivation is not just neurological, it is philosophical. Most people are motivated by outcomes, by the image of the finished thing, the completed body, the published book, the successful business, the version of themselves they are working toward. And outcomes are a terrible motivator. Not because goals are bad, but because the outcome exists in the future. And the future, to your nervous system, is not real. It is a story you are telling yourself, a projection, a hope dressed up as a plan. Your nervous system lives in the present. It responds to the present. It is motivated by what is happening right now, in this moment, in this body, in this room. And this is the insight that separates the people who sustain motivation from the people who burn out, chasing a future that never quite arrives. They fall in love with the process. Not as a motivational slogan, not as something you put on a poster, but as a genuine neurological strategy. When the process itself becomes the reward, when the act of working becomes something your brain associates with satisfaction rather than just the means to an end, you have effectively hacked the dopamine system. You have moved the reward from the distant future into the immediate present. You have made motivation renewable. But there is a darker truth underneath all of this, and it is one that the productivity industry, the self-help industry, the entire motivational complex does not want you to think about too carefully. The question of motivation is inseparable from the question of meaning, because dopamine does not fire equally for everything. It fires most powerfully, most sustainably, for things that matter to us, not things we think should matter, not things other people have told us matter. Things that connect to something deep and genuine inside us that we may have spent years ignoring. The terrifying part is that many people are not unmotivated. They are motivated toward the wrong things. They have built lives around goals that were handed to them by parents, by culture, by the algorithm, by the image of the person they thought they were supposed to become. And they wonder why the dopamine doesn't come, why the motivation keeps failing, why they can make themselves do anything except the thing they've decided their life is supposed to be about. It is not a discipline problem. It is an alignment problem. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps and went on to write one of the most important books ever written about human psychology, observed something extraordinary in the camps. The people who survived longest were not always the physically strongest. They were not always the most resourceful. They were the ones who had a reason, a specific, personal, irreplaceable reason to live. Frankl called it the will to meaning, and he argued, based on years of the most brutal human observation imaginable, that human beings can endure almost anyhow if they have a strong enough why. This is not poetry, this is neuroscience. When the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning and goal-directed behavior, is connected to something that carries genuine personal meaning, it activates with a consistency and a power that no external reward can replicate. Meaning is the most powerful motivator in the human nervous system. Not money, not approval, not the achievement of the goal. Meaning. And then something even stranger happened when researchers began studying intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. They gave people who loved drawing a reward for drawing. They paid them. They gave them gold stars. They gave them external recognition for something they had previously done, purely for the joy of it. And then they took the reward away. And the people stopped drawing. Not because they had changed, but because their brains had reframed the activity. It had gone from something they did because it mattered to something they did for a reward. And without the reward, the brain said, why bother? This phenomenon, called the overjustification effect, is one of the most disturbing findings in all of motivational psychology, because it means that rewarding yourself excessively for things you intrinsically care about can actually destroy the intrinsic motivation itself. Your brain will trade meaning for money, and then it will discover that money is not enough, and you will be left with neither. So what actually works? Not the 10-step system, not the morning routine you saw on social media, not the productivity hack or the cold shower or the vision board. What actually works is this. Know why you are doing what you are doing, not the surface why, not the answer you give other people when they ask, the real why, the one underneath all the others, the one that, when you find it, makes your chest feel slightly different. Then protect that why from the marketplace. Do not monetize it prematurely. Do not optimize it for other people's approval. Do not let it become a performance. Keep it yours. Then make the doing of it the point, not the result, not the recognition, not the version of yourself you'll be when it's done, the actual physical act of doing the thing, today, in this moment, in this body. And when the motivation dips, because it will, because it always does, because the middle is long, and the brain is ancient, and efficiency obsessed, do not interpret the dip as a signal to stop. Interpret it as a signal that the work is becoming real. Because the dip is not the end of motivation. The dip is where commitment begins. You are not lazy. You are a biological machine with an ancient brain trying to navigate a world it was never designed for, pursuing goals on timescales it was never built to sustain, searching for meaning in a culture that keeps trying to sell you a substitute. The people you admire, the ones who seem to never lose momentum, who wake up driven and go to bed still reaching, they are not different from you. They have simply found something worth the middle. Something worth the dip. Something worth waking up for, even on the days when the dopamine doesn't come, and the goal feels impossible, and the distance between who they are and who they are trying to become feels infinite. They have found their why, and every morning they choose it again. The question is not how to get motivated. The question is what you are willing to be in the middle of. Because that, not the exciting beginning, not the triumphant ending, but the quiet, unglamorous, dopamine-depleted middle, that is where your life is actually being built. Right now, today, in the hours you spend deciding whether to begin. For more, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.